My name is Nellie Gibbons. I'm 31 years old. I was 7 months pregnant when my sister walked into my baby shower after 5 years of silence, looked my husband in the eye, and said, "Honey, I've been waiting for you to tell her." She was pregnant too. She held up what she called a marriage certificate. 47 people in that room turned to look at my face. My mother, my own mother, nodded slowly like she already knew. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked toward my sister, looked at the document in her hand, and asked her one question. She dropped it before I finished the sentence. But you need to understand something first. That moment, the certificate, the room, the 47 faces, that wasn't where the story started. It started much earlier, in a house where I learned very young that some children are chosen and some are not. And I was never the one who was chosen. My sister Celeste is 5 years younger than me. I'm 31. She's 26. We grew up in the same house with the same mother, and somehow we grew up in completely different families. There was a blue ceramic bowl on our kitchen shelf, green-blue glaze, bought at a church sale. I was 11 when Celeste knocked it off the counter. It shattered across the floor. My mother, Lorraine, looked at the pieces, then looked at me. "Nellie, you know better than to leave things where your sister can reach them." I hadn't left anything anywhere. I was standing across the room. But I was older. Being older meant being responsible. It meant absorbing things. It meant being the one who understood. That bowl got glued back together and put back on the shelf. I saw it every day until I moved out. Every single day. The bowl is a small example. There were bigger ones. When it came time for college, Lorraine used the family savings to cover Celeste's tuition. All of it. I found out by accident. She asked me to print a bank statement, and there it was. A transfer of $8,400, August 15th. I was working night shifts at the county clerk's office to cover my own fees at the same time. I asked her about it. She said, "I thought you didn't need it. You always seemed like you had it handled." I did have it handled, because no one else was going to handle it for me. I worked at that clerk's office for 3 years, processing marriage licenses, divorce filings, deed transfers, name changes. I handled every kind of legal document that passed through a county's hands. I knew what each one was supposed to look like, the layout, the seal placement, the signature lines, the watermark. I knew which counties used which formats. I knew what a real document felt like versus something someone printed at home and hoped no one would look at too closely. When I left that job, I didn't think I'd ever need that knowledge again. I was so wrong. By the time I finished college, I had stopped expecting things from my family. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. You can only reach for something that isn't there so many times before you understand it's not coming. I wasn't angry, I was just done. And then I met Theo, 6 years ago, a gallery opening at Ponce City Market in Atlanta. He was standing in front of a large abstract piece, arms crossed, head tilted, clearly not sure what he was looking at. He didn't pretend to know. I liked that immediately. We talked for 2 hours. He was an architect. Sharp, steady, genuinely curious about the world. He asked me questions and then actually listened to the answers. At the end of the night, he wrote his number on the edge of the gallery brochure and handed it to me. I still have that brochure in my desk drawer. Celeste was at that gallery opening. It was the first of 2 times she ever met Theo. They talked for about 10 minutes near the entrance. She asked him about his work. I noticed, and then let it go. People talk at parties. 4 months later, Theo came to a family dinner. Celeste was there again. She asked him more questions than I remembered. About his firm, his projects, where he saw himself in 10 years. She left the dinner early without explaining why. 2 weeks after that, she started pulling away from me. Shorter texts, longer gaps, then nothing. By the spring of 2020, she was gone. No explanation, just an email, 1 line, no subject. "I need some time away from everything. Don't look for me," I tried. 11 times in the first year, calls, texts, more emails. The 11th time I called, the number was disconnected. I stopped after that. Not because I didn't care, because I understood that people disappear when they want to disappear. Lorraine wasn't worried. Every time I brought Celeste up, she had a ready answer. "Celeste needs space. Celeste is fine. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is." I believed her because she was my mother and I was still doing that. still giving her the benefit of the doubt she had never extended to me. There was one moment I let myself forget about for a long time. I was visiting Lorraine in 2022, helping her sort through some mail, when I saw a postcard sitting on the counter near the fruit bowl. Amsterdam, a photograph of the canals. I picked it up without thinking. Lorraine took it out of my hand and put it in a drawer, changed the subject before I could read the back. I didn't ask. I don't know why I didn't ask. Maybe some part of me knew that the answer would cost me something I wasn't ready to pay yet. Theo and I got married in June of 2021, 38 people, a garden ceremony, nothing elaborate, exactly what we both wanted. Celeste had been gone over a year by then. I didn't try to find her for the wedding. I'd already run out of attempts. Lorraine came. She was quiet most of the day. During the toast, she raised her glass and looked somewhere just past my shoulder and said, "I just wish Celeste could be here." On my wedding day, that was what she said. I kept smiling. I'd had a lot of practice. That night, after the reception, I got a text from an unknown number. 2 words. "Congratulations." No name, no punctuation. I deleted it and didn't think about it again for a very long time. The next 4 years were good, better than good. Theo's career grew steadily. His firm landed a federal infrastructure contract, the kind that changes a practice's trajectory permanently. We bought a house in Decatur, a suburb of Atlanta, close enough to the city and far enough to breathe. We talked about starting a family. In February of 2025, I took a pregnancy test. 2 lines. I sat on the bathroom floor for 4 minutes and held it and felt something I didn't have a word for yet. Big and quiet and terrifying and right. My first instinct was to call Celeste. I looked at my phone. I sat with that instinct for almost a full minute. Then I put the phone down. She had chosen to disappear. I wasn't going to reach out on the most vulnerable day of my life, only to hear nothing back. I sent Theo a photo instead. That was the right call. That was always the right call. 2 weeks after I announced the pregnancy on social media, I got a follow request on my private Instagram account. Handle, @c.everett92. No profile photo, no posts. I removed the request without accepting it and forgot about it by the next morning. The baby shower was September 20th, 2025. Portia, my best friend, the one who had shown up for every hard thing in the last 6 years, helped me plan it. We chose sage green and white. She came over early to help with the flowers and the table setup. The house looked beautiful. 47 guests. I was wearing a cream dress and holding a pair of yellow muslin newborn pajamas. Impossibly small, soft. When Portia took out her camera and said, "Let me get a picture before everyone arrives," I said yes. That was the last photo taken of me that day before I knew what was coming. Lorraine arrived 40 minutes early. She didn't offer to help. She walked straight to the chair at the front of the seating area, the best sight line in the room, and sat down. She had her purse on her lap and her hands folded over it. I thought she was tired. I thought she was being herself. I was still being generous with her. Even then. By 11:30, the house was full. I was standing by the gift table, holding those yellow pajamas, when the conversations near the front door began to quiet. Not all at once, like a wave pulling back from the shore, starting at the entrance and moving toward where I was standing. I heard heels on the hardwood floor, deliberate, evenly spaced, not rushed. I turned around, white. Not accidental white, intentional white. The kind of white that knows it's wrong for the occasion and wears it anyway. Celeste was 6 months pregnant, and the dress made sure everyone in the room knew it the moment she walked in. 5 years. She looked different and exactly the same. I said her name. Just that. "Celeste," she smiled. "Hey sis, it's been a while." She didn't move toward me. She looked past me, toward the back of the room, and her expression shifted into something I had never seen on her face before. Settled, decided. Like someone who has been rehearsing for a long time and has finally arrived at the performance. Theo had just come in from the kitchen. "Honey," Celeste said. The room didn't move. People don't register things immediately when they don't fit. The brain searches for the innocent explanation first. A nickname, a mistake, something that makes sense. Then she said it again, slower this time, loud enough that the back row heard it clearly. "Honey, I think it's time to tell her." Theo went completely still. He set his glass down on the counter, The sound it made was small and final. He looked at Celeste the way you look at something you've been dreading. Not surprised exactly, but not ready either. Celeste reached into the brown craft bag she was carrying. She pulled out a folded document. She unfolded it with both hands, held it up so the whole room could see it, and began to speak. She said the name on the document was Theodore Gibbons and Celeste Everett. She said they had been married. She said the baby she was carrying was his. And she said that I had known Tip Tuk Tu Joan Bikat, Bat Jiao Tu Kan Celeste Gio Tu Giailan. She said the name on the document was Theodore Gibbons and Celeste Everett. She said they had been married. She said the baby she was carrying was his. And then she said the last part, the part that was the cruelest, the part I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count. She said that I had known all along and chosen to pretend otherwise. She delivered it the way you deliver a fact you've rehearsed until it no longer sounds rehearsed. Evenly, without trembling, looking not at the room but at me, only at me, like the 47 other people were set pieces and I was the only audience that mattered. I stood very still. I want to explain what it feels like to be accused of something in front of people who love you. People who came with wrapped gifts and good intentions and drove across the city on a Saturday morning because they wanted to celebrate your child. It doesn't feel like anger, not at first. It feels like the floor has shifted. Not collapsed, just tilted slightly, enough that your body has to recalibrate. You check your footing. You check whether the walls are where you left them. The walls were where I left them. I checked my footing. I looked at the room. The woman closest to the door, someone I'd known since graduate school, someone who had held my hand through 2 hard years of my life, had both hands pressed flat against her collarbone. Her expression was not outrage on my behalf. It was the expression of someone watching a situation they do not yet know how to categorize, suspended, waiting. 2 men near the back window had turned away from Celeste and toward each other. One of them said something under his breath. The other one nodded. 3 women in the middle of the room, acquaintances, Theo's colleagues' wives, people I had met 4 or 5 times over the years at firm events, were looking at the certificate still raised in Celeste's hand, with the focused attention of people who believe that a piece of paper is the most reliable narrator in any room. And then there was the woman who spoke first. Her name was Sandra. I had known her 8 years. She had been at my bachelorette weekend. She had helped me pick out the paint color for our bedroom when we first moved into the house. She turned to me and said, loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Nellie, did you know about this? Not is this true, not what's going on. Not are you okay? Did you know about this?" As if the operative question was not whether my sister was lying, but whether I had been complicit in my own betrayal. Portia stood up. She was halfway through a sentence. I could see her mouth moving. I could see the shape of my name on her lips. When the woman standing directly beside her put a hand on Portia's arm. Not aggressively, just enough. And Portia stopped. She sat back down. She looked at me with an expression that said, "I'm here. Tell me what you need." I needed her to stay exactly where she was. I did not look at Theo yet. I knew where he was. I could feel him behind me and to the left, near the kitchen entrance. I knew he was still. I knew he was processing the same way he always processed, by going very quiet and very internal before he moved. I had seen him do it in hard meetings. I had seen him do it when his father was sick. Theo's stillness was not passivity, it was preparation. I would look at him when this was done. Right now I was looking at my mother. Lorraine had not moved from her chair. I want you to understand the geometry of this. She had arrived 40 minutes before any other guest. She had walked past the flowers Portia had arranged, past the gift table, past the food laid out on the kitchen counter, and she had chosen a specific seat. The one with the clearest view of the entrance and the clearest view of where I was standing. She had sat down with her purse on her lap, and she had waited. I had thought she was tired. I had thought she was being herself. She was being herself. That was the problem. I just hadn't understood until that moment exactly who that self was. The woman next to Lorraine turned to her with that silent question on her face, the one that means confirm or deny. And my mother who had held me when I was born, who had driven me to school for 12 years, who had sat across from me at 100 dinners, and known all the small facts of my life. Looked back at that woman and nodded. Once, slowly, with complete composure, as if she had prepared for this moment, as if she had sat with it long enough that the nod came naturally. There are things that change you in a second. Not gradually, not over time. In 1 second, in one gesture. My mother's nod was one of those things. I felt it land somewhere deep and permanent. The way a stone lands at the bottom of a well. You hear it hit. You understand immediately that getting it back out will be a different kind of work entirely. I did not cry. I thought about crying. I recognized the pressure behind my eyes, the tightening in my throat. I let myself notice it. And then I set it aside the same way I had set the yellow pajamas down on the table beside me, gently, without drama. Because I needed my hands free. I had already made the decision before I was fully conscious of making it. That's how it works sometimes. Your body understands the situation before your mind finishes processing it. My body was already oriented toward Celeste. My feet were already moving. 4 steps. I counted them because I needed something to count. Something concrete and numerical and under my control in a room where everything else had become unmoored. 1, 2, 3, 4. Celeste did not move back. She was still holding the certificate at chest height, still performing certainty, still reading the room as though the room were still hers. She had prepared for resistance. She had prepared for argument, for raised voices, for the kind of confrontation that turns into a spectacle. She had not prepared for someone walking toward her slowly, without expression, with one hand extended. I held out my hand. She looked at it. A full second passed. Then another. The room was watching her hand the way people watch a chess match. Not quite understanding every move, but understanding that the next move matters. She gave me the document. Because refusing would have looked like guilt, and she had not yet accepted that she had already lost. I held the certificate with both hands. I did not rush. Rushing would have suggested uncertainty. I held it the way I had held hundreds of documents in the county clerk's office. Parallel to the floor, slight distance from the body, eyes moving methodically from one section to the next. The header was formatted correctly. The names were printed cleanly. The date was plausible, a Saturday in March of 2023, which would have been technically possible if either of them had been in the same city, which I already knew they had not been, but which I could not prove in this room in this moment. I moved my eyes to the bottom right corner. There it is. Every time. That is where they get it wrong. The county seal was off. The font weight on the county name was too heavy. A small thing, barely perceptible. The kind of thing that looks fine on a screen and reveals itself only in print. The border around the seal was 2 points too thick, and the signature line was formatted with a tab indent that Georgia County offices stopped using in 2019, when the state standardized its document templates across all 67 counties. I had processed documents under the old format and under the new one. I knew the difference the way you know the difference between the sound of your own front door and every other door. Not because you've memorized it, but because you've heard it thousands of times. The document in my hands had been made by someone who found a template online and did not know that templates go out of date. I looked up from the certificate. I looked directly at Celeste. The room was silent in a way that rooms rarely are. Not the silence of people holding their breath, but the silence of people who have collectively agreed to stop existing temporarily so they can witness what happens next. Celeste, I said. My voice was level, not cold, not warm. Level. The way you speak when you want every word to land cleanly, and you cannot afford for emotion to blur the edges. Which county clerk's office was this filed under? She opened her mouth. And under which clerk's name? She had prepared for so many things. She had prepared for me to demand an explanation. She had prepared for me to turn to Theo and ask him whether it was true. She had prepared for tears, mine, and for the kind of chaos that tears create in a room full of people. The way they shift allegiances and create noise and give a person like Celeste room to maneuver. She had not prepared for a procedural question about county filing records. Her mouth stayed open. Nothing came. I watched her face move through it. I watched the confidence drain out from the top down, the way water leaves a glass. The surface dropping first, then the middle, then the bottom. Her eyes went from mine to the document and back to mine. She was looking for the answer somewhere. In me. In the paper. In the room. The room did not have the answer. The paper did not have the answer, and I was not going to give it to her. Her hand began to shake, not violently, just enough. A small tremor that started at the wrist and moved upward. She tried to hold the document steady and couldn't. It slipped. It hit the hardwood floor with a sound that was softer than I expected. Dry paper on old wood. A small, flat, final sound. No one moved toward it. I reached down and picked it up. I straightened. I walked to the gift table and set the certificate down beside the yellow pajamas, parallel to the table's edge, face down. Then I turned toward Portia. "Portia," I said, "can you ask Theo to bring me some water?" Portia looked at me for a moment. Her eyes were bright in a way that told me she was working very hard not to cry. "Yeah," she said. "Of course." She went to find Theo. I stood where I was. I did not look at Celeste. I did not look at my mother. I looked at the gift table, at the wrapped packages stacked in their careful arrangement, at the yellow pajamas beside the certificate, at the small handwritten tags on each gift with names and good wishes, written in ink by people who had come here today because they believed in the ordinary miracle of a child arriving into the world. That was what this day was supposed to be. That was what it still was, underneath everything Celeste had tried to lay on top of it. I held on to that. Theo came from the kitchen. He handed me a glass of water without a word. His hand found the small of my back for 1 second, just one. And then he stepped back. He understood that this was my room right now, that the most useful thing he could do was be present without making himself the center. That is one of the things I love most about him. He knows when to fill space and when to hold it open. I drank some water. I set the glass down. And then the room began to exhale. People started gathering their things, slowly at first, then with increasing purpose. There was a particular choreography to it. The way people leave a gathering that has gone wrong, the specific social grammar of an exit that is not quite a retreat. They touched my arm, some of them hugged me. A few said things, call me, or let me know, or just my name, said in a particular tone that meant, I'm sorry this happened in front of me, and I don't know how to hold it. I said thank you for coming to every single one of them. The same words, the same tone. Not because I was performing normalcy, but because gratitude does not stop being appropriate just because the context has fractured. They came. That mattered. Whatever they believed in the middle of those 90 seconds. And I was not naive enough to think every person in that room had doubted Celeste immediately. They were here because they cared about me. I was willing to let that be enough for today. 20 people left in 15 minutes. Portia stayed. She moved through the room quietly, collecting cups, straightening things that didn't need straightening, giving me something to look at that wasn't Celeste. Celeste had not gotten up from the floor. She was sitting where she'd sunk after the certificate dropped, knees to the side, one hand flat on the hardwood. The white dress wrinkled and pulled around her. Her hair had come down from whatever she'd styled it into. She wasn't making noise exactly. She was making the sound of someone who has run completely out of performance and is only left with what's underneath. The brown craft bag was on the floor beside her, collapsed and empty. My mother was still in her chair. Lorraine had not moved. She had not gone to Celeste. She had not come to me. She was sitting with her purse still on her lap, hands folded over it, and she was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. I did not know what to call it then. I have thought about it since. I think the closest word is reckoning. The look of someone who has done a calculation they cannot undo, and is now watching the results come in. I did not go to her. I walked to the kitchen. I braced both hands on the counter. I looked out the window over the sink into the back garden, where the sage-green tablecloths from the outdoor setup were still weighted down with small river stones, because we'd been expecting a breeze. Through the glass, I could see Theo on the patio. He had his phone to his ear. He was standing still, the way he always stood when he was in a serious conversation, feet planted, one hand in his pocket, weight distributed evenly. I could not hear what he was saying. I watched him for a moment. He looked up and saw me through the window. He did not smile. He held my gaze for a few seconds. Then he nodded once, slowly, and went back to his call. That was enough, that single nod. It meant, I have this. You don't have to carry this part. I turned back to the room. Portia was beside me. She had waited until I was ready to be stood beside. There's something you need to see, she said. She held out her phone. The screen showed my private Instagram account. The viewer list for one of my stories from 6 weeks earlier. An ultrasound photo I'd posted for close friends only. The list of accounts that had viewed it was long, but Portia had scrolled to a specific name and stopped. At c.everett92, I stared at it. Keep scrolling, Portia said. I scrolled back through month after month of viewer lists. The same handle appeared in nearly every one. Ultrasound updates. The nursery before and after painting. The announcement video. A reel Theo had made of us assembling the crib. Half comedic, mostly chaotic. The photo of the sage green paint sample held up against the wall. Every single one. At c.everett92 had watched all of it. For over a year. From the same account with no photo, no posts, no other activity, just watching. The account was made in 2021, Portia said. I checked. The join date is in the bio, March 2021. 3 months before our wedding. I handed the phone back. I stood very still. There's more, Portia said. She said it carefully, the way she said things she knew would cost me something. My cousin Dara ran into your Aunt Faye a few weeks ago. Faye mentioned something about Celeste. I didn't think it was relevant at the time. She paused. I think it's relevant now. She told me about Russell Payne. Celeste had been in Portland for the past 2 years. She had been in a relationship with a man named Russell. Steady, long-term, the kind that looks from the outside like it might go somewhere. When Celeste got pregnant, Russell found out and left. A text message. I can't do this. I'm sorry. Sent in May of 2025. I did the math quickly. February 2025, I announced my pregnancy. May 2025, Russell left. September 2025, Celeste walked into my baby shower with a forged document and called my husband honey in front of 47 people. The timeline was not a coincidence. It was a collapse. A person losing their footing and grabbing for the nearest thing that looks solid, even if that thing belonged to someone else. Even if that thing was never real to begin with. I looked across the room at Celeste, still sitting on the floor, 26 years old, 6 months pregnant, alone in a way that had nothing to do with the number of people in the room. And I felt it, that unnamed thing again, heavier now that I understood more of the shape of it. It was not sympathy exactly, it was not forgiveness, it was something more complicated than either of those. It was the specific grief of watching someone you once loved become someone you don't recognize, and understanding that the distance between who they were and who they became was built one unexamined choice at a time, over years, in private. It was also the grief of knowing that I could not close that distance, that it was not mine to close. Portia drove Celeste home. That was Portia's decision, not mine. She made it quietly and quickly, and I was grateful for it because I did not want Celeste in a rideshare alone, and I did not want to be the one responsible for her transportation. Portia had a gift for solving the practical problem in front of her without requiring anyone to acknowledge the gift. My mother left without speaking to me. She stood, adjusted her purse strap, walked to the front door, and closed it behind her without looking back. I watched her go. Then I went to the kitchen and stood at the sink and finished the glass of water Theo had brought me. The house was nearly empty by 2 in the afternoon. Portia came back after dropping Celeste off. She helped me wrap up the food that hadn't been touched, fold the tablecloths, carry the gift bags to the spare room. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. At one point, she stopped in the middle of the living room with a stack of paper plates in her hands and said, "You were incredible today." I said, "I was terrified." She said, "I know, that's what I mean." That night, after Portia left and the house was quiet, Theo and I sat in the kitchen, not talking, just sitting across from each other with tea neither of us was really drinking, in the particular silence of 2 people who have survived something and are still close enough to the edge of it to move carefully. After a long time, he said, "I want you to know that I'm going to be angry about this for a while. On your behalf. Not right now. Right now, I just want to be here with you. But I want you to know the anger is there. I said, I know. He said, she sat in that gallery and talked to me for 10 minutes, and I never knew. I said, neither did I. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need from me tonight? I said, just this. Just here. He nodded. We sat there a long time. 3 days after the baby shower, I was alone in the nursery. Theo was downstairs. The house was the particular quiet of a weekday afternoon. Street noise at a distance. A neighbor's lawnmower somewhere several houses over. The low hum of the refrigerator traveling up through the walls. Small, ordinary sounds. The sounds of a life that is continuing. The room was not quite finished. The final wall needed one more coat of sage green paint. I had the roller on the tray, but I hadn't started yet. I was sitting in the rocking chair in the corner, and I was holding the yellow pajamas. I had moved them to the dresser after the shower. I had folded them and put them there deliberately, in the same motion I might use to put away something precious that had been handled roughly. Careful, protective, slightly too deliberate. Now I was holding them again. They were so small. I have said that before, but I want you to understand it the way I understood it sitting in that chair. There is something about newborn clothing that functions as a kind of argument. An argument against despair, against the smallness of human cruelty, against the idea that the worst thing that happened in any given week is the defining thing. These pajamas were going to be worn by a whole person, who would eventually form opinions and have preferences and say things that surprised me, who would grow into a human being I did not yet know. That person was not yet arrived. And the world she was arriving into was not clean or simple or fair. But it was the world I was building for her. And I was still building it. I thought about Celeste at 16. I remembered a specific evening, late summer, the year she was going into junior year, the year before everything started shifting between us in ways I couldn't name at the time. We had climbed out onto the flat section of roof above the back porch, the way we did sometimes when the house felt too small. She was lying on her back looking at the sky. I was sitting with my knees up, looking at the neighborhood. She said, "Do you think we're going to end up okay?" I said. "What do you mean, okay?" She said, "Like, normal okay, not messed up." I thought about it. I said, "Probably some of both." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I think you'll be fine. You're the kind of person who figures things out." I hadn't known what to say to that. I'd said something deflecting, something forgettable. I hadn't understood that she wasn't describing me. She was describing the gap she felt between us. She was telling me that she saw herself on the other side of something, and me on this side, and that she had already begun to understand those as fixed positions. I had not heard it that way, not then. Sitting in the rocking chair, holding those yellow pajamas, I heard it. And I asked myself the question I had been circling for 3 days. If I had called one more time, a 12th call, after the number was disconnected, after I'd given up, would anything have changed? I didn't know. I genuinely did not know. And I had to make peace with that specific unknowing, because it was not going to resolve itself. It was not the kind of question that gets answered. It is the kind of question you carry with you, and the carrying of it is part of what it means to have loved someone imperfectly in an imperfect situation. I was not responsible for what Celeste had done. I was clear on that. But I was honest enough to admit that our history was not simple, and that simple histories do not produce what happened in my living room on September 20th, 2025. I set the pajamas back on the dresser. I picked up the paint roller. I finished the last wall. 1 week after the shower, Lorraine called 4 times in 2 days. I did not answer. On the 3rd day, I heard her car in the driveway. I want to be honest about how I felt walking to that door. I was not righteously calm. There was a part of me that was furious. A specific, hot, old fury. The kind that has been accumulating since childhood and finally has a specific event to attach itself to. There was also a part of me that was tired in the way you get tired of something that has required management for your entire life. And there was a smaller part, I will not pretend it wasn't there, that still wanted her to say something that would make it make sense. That still wanted the explanation to exist that would reframe the nod into something survivable, something other than what it was. I opened the door before she knocked. She looked older than she had a week ago. People sometimes age visibly in the aftermath of hard events, and Lorraine was no exception. She was put together, coat buttoned, hair done, but around the eyes there was something that hadn't been there before, a tiredness that went deeper than sleep. "I want to explain," she said. "I know you do," I said, "but I want you to hear something first." She waited. "You arrived 40 minutes early," I said. "You sat down in the front row before any other guest arrived. You didn't ask if I needed help. You didn't bring anything. You just sat down and waited. And when Celeste held up that document and someone looked at you for confirmation, you nodded." I paused. "That was not a spontaneous response, Mom. That was a decision." She opened her mouth. I held up one hand. "I'm not asking you to defend it. I'm telling you that I saw it. I saw all of it. And I need you to understand that when I say I'm your daughter too, that's not a guilt trip. That's information. You made a choice at that table. I'm making one now." Her expression did not collapse. That was the thing about Lorraine. She did not collapse. She processed. She recalculated. I watched her do it. The way her eyes shifted slightly and her posture adjusted. The way she was already moving into the next position before the current one had fully settled. She said, "Celeste is my daughter too. I can't just—" "I know," I said. "She is. And that's between you and her. But I'm your daughter too. And you chose your seat before the ceremony started, and you nodded when she lied. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see that. I'm not going to let you explain it into something else." Lorraine was quiet. "I'm not ending anything today," I said. "I'm not calling this permanent. But I need you to know that things are different now. I need you to know that I see things differently now. And I need some time to decide what that means going forward." She looked at me for a long time. Then she looked down at the porch step between us. "I didn't know she was going to do all of it," she said quietly. "I knew she was coming. I didn't know about the document." Something moved in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but information. Useful, painful information. "Okay," I said. She looked up. "That matters," I said. "It doesn't change the nod, but it matters." She nodded again, this time smaller, less composed. "I need you to go home, Mom." She went. I closed the door. I leaned against it. I put both hands on my stomach, on the firm, warm curve of it, on the life that was moving and growing and waiting in there, patient and unaware. I said, "You will not grow up in a house where love has conditions you can't see. I promise you that. Whatever I get wrong, and I will get things wrong, I know that about myself, I will always make sure you know that my love for you does not come with a nod I keep in reserve. It is not contingent. It is not positioned. It just is." I stayed there a while. Then I went inside and made dinner and called Portia and talked about nothing important for 45 minutes. And it was one of the best conversations I'd had in weeks. October came in quietly. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, slowly in the background, without drama. Bart Hensley had filed the necessary paperwork. There was a police report. Celeste had retained a public defender. Theo gave me updates when there were updates, and did not give me updates when there were none. I appreciated both. I started seeing Dr. Carol Webb every Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. She had an office on the 3rd floor of a building near Piedmont Park, with a window that looked out at the tops of oak trees. I spent a lot of time looking at those trees during our sessions. There was something clarifying about watching leaves move while you talk about difficult things. In our 3rd session, she asked me something I had not expected. She said, "What would it mean to you if Celeste had done all of this not because she wanted Theo, but because she wanted to be you?" I sat with that for a long time. I said, "I think I already know that. I think that's the part that's hardest to hold." She said, "Why is it the hardest?" I said, "Because it means the problem was never Theo, and it means there was probably never anything I could have given her that would have been enough. Because you can't give someone your life, and that's what she wanted." Dr. Webb wrote something in her notebook. I looked at the oak trees. "It also means," I said, "that at some point she stopped wanting her own life, and I didn't see that happening. I wasn't looking." "Could you have seen it?" "Maybe," I said. "If I'd kept looking." We sat with that. Not to assign blame, not to resolve it. Just to sit with it. The way Dr. Webb had been teaching me to sit with things that didn't resolve. to let them be present without letting them be in charge. Portia came over on a Saturday in mid-October, and I asked her to be the baby's godmother. I had prepared a small speech. I gave about one sentence of it before she started crying, at which point the speech became irrelevant, and we sat on the kitchen floor eating crackers and hummus for an hour, talking about something else entirely. It was one of the better afternoons of the year. I opened a new email draft in the last week of October. I addressed it to Celeste's old email, the one with the empty subject line, the one I had memorized without meaning to, because I had stared at it so many times in the years it sat unanswered in my sent folder. I typed for a long time. I deleted most of it. What I kept was this: Celeste, I'm not writing to litigate what happened. I'm writing because I've been thinking about the children, yours and mine. And I don't think they should grow up as strangers because of choices that weren't theirs. I'm not in a place to make promises right now, but I wanted you to know that the door is not locked from my side. What you do with that is your choice. It always was. I left the subject line empty. I saved it as a draft. I did not send it. Sending it felt premature, like reaching for a conclusion before the situation had settled into what it was actually going to be. Some communications need to wait until the dust is real dust and not still moving through the air. But I kept the draft. I looked at it sometimes. I thought, when the time is right, I will know. November arrived, 36 weeks. The due date was close enough to feel specific. On a Saturday afternoon, Theo painted the last section of the nursery wall, the baseboard edge along the north wall, the part we'd left for last because of the trim work. I sat in the rocking chair in the corner and watched him. He was careful and slow, the way he was careful and slow with things he cared about. He got a small section near the corner slightly uneven. He didn't notice. I noticed. I said nothing. It was perfect. He mounted the bookshelf on the wall beside the window. He was off by about 3 degrees. I could see it from the chair, but not from where he was standing. He stepped back and looked at it and said, "That looks good, right?" I said, "It looks great." Portia's box of books arrived that afternoon. Board books, picture books, 2 early readers for the distant future, a card on top. For your library, the good stuff only. I already checked. I put them on the shelf. Some of them leaned. The shelf held. That evening, after Theo went downstairs, I sat alone in the room. It was finished. Both coats of paint on every wall. The crib assembled. Theo and I had spent a Sunday afternoon with the instructions and 2 glasses of wine, and had done it mostly correctly on the first try. The small dresser painted white. The mobile Portia had given us turning slowly in the draft from the heating vent. I picked up the yellow pajamas from the dresser. I had not looked at the tag closely before. It was a standard care label, washing instructions, fabric content, size. But along the bottom edge, in small black permanent marker, careful and deliberate, Theo had written something. For you, whenever you arrive. He must have written it before the shower, before any of it. In some ordinary moment when he was folding things or organizing the gift table, he had picked up this pair of pajamas and written those 6 words because they were true and because he wanted the baby to know them from the beginning. I sat with that for a long time, long enough for the room to get a little darker, for the mobile to slow and stop and start again, for the sounds from downstairs to change from kitchen sounds to television sounds, to the particular quiet of someone settling in for the evening. I thought about everything that had happened since the morning I bought these pajamas. I thought about Celeste at 16 on the roof, asking if we were going to be okay. I thought about 11 phone calls and a disconnected number. I thought about a postcard from Amsterdam going into a drawer. I thought about 47 people and a document with the wrong seal and a question about a county clerk. I thought about my mother's nod. I thought about the draft email sitting in my outbox, unsent, subject line, blank. And I thought, I do not know how this ends. That is the honest answer. I do not know what Celeste will do next, or what the legal process will produce, or whether my mother and I will find a way back to each other, or whether those 2 children will grow up knowing they are cousins. I don't know. What I know is this. The room is sage green. The shelf is 3 degrees off and holding. The books are there. My daughter will grow up in a house where she knows the difference between a real document and a forged one. Not literally, not at first, but in the deeper sense. She will grow up knowing what it looks like when someone walks into a room and tries to rewrite the truth in real time. She will know that the correct response is not volume, it is not collapse. It is 4 steps, 1 question, and the willingness to let the truth do what truth does. She will know that some people will nod when they should speak, that some rooms will turn and look at you as though you are the problem, that 47 people can believe something false for 90 seconds before one question changes the direction of the air. And she will know that surviving that is not the same as being unaffected by it, that you can hold your ground and still grieve what it cost you. That strength is not the absence of sadness. It is sadness held alongside something that refuses to give way. I do not know what I'm building exactly. I am building as I go, with the materials available, in the shape that seems right from where I'm standing. The pajamas are impossibly small. She will fit into them soon. For you, whenever you arrive, I am ready.